Hey guys, did you know that right now we're giving away over 2 hours of professional compositing training for free? All you have to do is sign up for our newsletter and we'll send you a free, detailed tutorial on how to make this image from start to finish. Also, you'll never miss another video as we'll send you regular updates whenever we bring out new content. So please go and check it out at bigideaedit.com/newsletter. Hey guys, my name is Toby and welcome back to another very exciting Photoshop tutorial where today we're going to be taking a look at dodging and burning. Now, if you've not heard of dodging and burning, this is kind of something that's been carried forward from analog photography, where you used to sit in a dark room and literally do this to a piece of film in order to selectively lighten or darken certain areas of a shot. And we're going to do it today in Photoshop, which is a lot easier, I will say that much. But there's a few different ways of doing this, and I wanted to run through a couple of them for you. So, without wasting any more time, let's get to it. So the first technique I want to talk about is using the dedicated tools called the dodge tool and the burn tool inside of Photoshop. And this is probably my least favorite way of doing it. So if we go to like the burn tool, and we zoom in on this belt here. Now, the one saving grace of these tools is that you can select a range, which means that if I'm attempting to darken this belt, but I don't really want to darken the gi that she's wearing here, then I can do that. And I probably want to untick protect tones because that's not what we're trying to do here. Now, the problem with that is that immediately that's way too much because it's on 50%, and I generally find that if you're going to use these tools, you want to use them on like 5 or 6% probably, and it's still, it still will kind of go quite heavy-handed quite quickly. Now, one of the reasons why this is not a good tool is that if you kind of overdo it, you can't really go back. You have to kind of edit undo until it's kind of right again, and it's very hard to undo anything that you kind of do wrong, and as far as I'm concerned, that's not a good thing. So that's probably the worst of the tools. So you can select the tonal range, which is nice, but it doesn't really make up for the fact it's not very good. The dodge tool works exactly the same way, but in the opposite. So you can still select your tones, you still have all this, but it works on making things brighter instead, and you can make things unbelievably bright, which it's not good. So the next technique that I've seen is kind of good in a way because it deals with highlights and shadows separately. But it's kind of an all or nothing sort of kind of effect. So what we can do is we're going to do this with adjustment layers. So let's do it with a curves adjustment layer. I don't use curves very often, even though I do like curves, but yeah. Anyway, beside the point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to darken this shot down slightly, and because we only want it to affect her, we're not trying to mess around with the background here, I'm going to clip this layer to her because she's actually on her own layer here. So I'm going to press Command-Alt-G, and now this curves layer is only affecting her, and I'm going to come into here and I'm going to invert this layer mask. So now it's not doing anything, it's kind of back to where it was, and I'm going to add another curves adjustment layer, and I'm going to clip this to her as well with Command-Alt-G, and I'm going to make this one brighter, and we don't want to make it too bright, and then I'm going to do the same thing and I'm going to invert that. So now I'm going to take my paintbrush tool and we're going to basically paint into these masks, and that's going to selectively dodge and burn for us. Now what we do want to do is reduce the opacity and flow of our brush. I find generally that 20 and 20 works quite well. By the way, you can change these with the keyboard shortcut very quickly. If you use any of the number keys, it will change the opacity. If you hold shift and press any of the number keys, it will change the flow. So I want to press 2 to make it 20% and shift 2 to make the flow 20%. Okay, so now we've done that. At the moment we're on, we should probably label these. So we'll call this one highlights and we'll call this one shadows. So with shadows selected, I want to paint with a white brush, and I'm going to make sure we've got a fairly soft brush, And we're just going to kind of come in here and just start to paint over some of these shadowy areas. And what you're going to see is this is going to start to just give the shot a little bit more definition in a few areas. And you know, this is an okay technique. It does of course mean, or the one I suppose real major benefit that you get with this technique is that once you've kind of painted something, you can, you know, control it after the fact, which is kind of nice. It's a nice way to be able to work, I think. And you know, it does give you a lot of flexibility. Maybe we'll just go for a slightly higher opacity, just so we're not here all day. Yeah, something like that, I think. But you can really start to like kind of pull out details and kind of add definition to things. I suppose one of the main sort of things you see dodging and burning being used for is if you get like any of these like sort of I suppose what's the better word for it, like bodybuilding shots or anything where you're trying to show off someone's muscular abdomen or something, you can tell those have been dodged and burned to the far end and back. I mean, they basically do it so that everything just looks super duper defined and hard and that sort of thing. And you don't really see it as much in portraiture. Now, if you go too much, you can obviously now paint with white back over the top of some of these and you can kind of remove some of it. But, you know, it's kind of personal preference. So this is one way of doing it. And then we do the same thing with the highlights. So we paint with white again, and we just kind of want to, you know, highlight the highlights. Try like 40%. You know, and this might not appear as though it's actually doing that much, but it's it is having quite an effect. So if we turn these off, you can kind of see already what has been done. So this is definitely one technique you could use, and like I said, you know, if you did want to play with it sort of more after the fact, it does give you that kind of selective control to do so. But let's move on to the last techniques. I'm just going to group those together and turn them off. This is my favorite technique and my preferred technique whenever I go to dodge and burn something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to press Command-Shift-N to do that. And it's going to give me an option in here called Mode, which, you know, you could make a new layer and change the mode down here, but there's a very good reason why we want to do it in this menu. And that is because if we set the mode to Overlay, it's going to give us this little tick box which says fill with overlay neutral color 50% gray. And we think, okay, so we'll hit that. And it's given us this kind of gray layer, but because of the blend mode, it hasn't actually affected anything. Now, what's good about this is it means that we can now paint with black and white, and we can dodge and burn. But before we do that, just so it's not going to affect the background again, we're going to clip this layer to the one underneath. So Command-Alt-G, that's now clipped so it won't affect the background. We don't have to worry too much about spilling over into it. So I can now take my brush tool, and I'm going to paint with black over some of these sort of shadowier areas. And, you know, it might be that, okay, that's probably a little bit too much. So we can hit X to swap our foreground and background colors. And I'm now painting with white, and you can just kind of take it away. And it's just a case of a little bit like masking, kind of balancing, painting black and white kind of over a lot of these areas, just to kind of tone everything up and give everything a little bit more shape in some of these folds of the fabric. It just makes it a little bit more interesting, I find. So, you know, we could come in here, we can actually highlight that bit and that bit maybe. We can maybe really darken up this bit. And a lot of these shadows in here, we want to see more of them. You know, perhaps can make this bit quite a lot darker, but not too dark, because this is the good thing about it. If you kind of get it wrong, you just need to paint over it again with white and it's gonna undo it. The other good thing is it's doing this all inside of one layer, which I'm quite a fan of. But it does mean that it's not quite as flexible in terms of you can paint an area and then decide whether you want it more or less. It's kind of, you have to treat everything individually. But I still think this gives you the most control over your dodging and burning. And as you can see, if we turn that on and off, that's already making quite a big difference. I'm not doing too much highlight work on this shot because it doesn't really need it. And the thing with this is, because it's a person in a white outfit, it doesn't really need much highlighting. I mean, we could highlight sort of some of her facial structure slightly, but you don't want to overdo it. That's the trick. You kind of want to just get the balance right, because you can totally change the shape of someone's face if you get this wrong. That's the one thing to be aware of. Yeah, so you can kind of do this as much or as little as you want, but it does give you quite a different look. And if we just solo this layer, let's unclip that for a second so we can see it. That's actually what I've done, and it is having quite an astonishing effect, I think, on our subject. So that's a quick guide to dodging and burning. I think that's about going to do it. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.